I returned to Russia in November 1914, at the beginning of the First World War, after a long journey through Egypt, Ceylon, and India. When leaving St. Petersburg, I had said that I was going to seek the miraculous. The miraculous is very difficult to define. For me, this word had a quite definite meaning. I had come to the conclusion a long time ago that there was no escape from the labyrinth of contradictions in which we live, except by an entirely new road, unlike anything hitherto known or used by us. I was unable to say where this new or forgotten road began. I already knew then, as an undoubted fact, that beyond the thin film of false reality there existed another reality from which, for some reason, something separated us. The miraculous was a penetration into this unknown reality. When I went away, I already knew I was going to look for a school or schools. I had arrived at this long ago. I realized that individual efforts were insufficient, and it was necessary to come into touch with the real and living thought which must be in existence somewhere, but with which we had lost contact. I could not explain it clearly, but it seemed to me that even the beginning of contact with the school may have a miraculous nature. I imagined, for example, the possibility of making contact with schools of the distant past, with schools of Pythagoras, with schools of Egypt, with the schools of those who built Notre Dame, and so on. It seemed to me that the barriers of time and space should disappear on making such a contact. Soon after my return to St. Petersburg in February and March 1915, I gave public lectures on my travels in India. The titles of the lectures were In Search of the Miraculous. I felt that on the basis of a search it would be possible to unite together a large number of people who were no longer able to swallow the customary forms of lying and living in lying. Later, I went to Moscow and started with editorial work in the newspaper for which I had written from India. Among people whom I met were two, one a musician and the other a sculptor, who very soon began to speak to me about a group in Moscow which was engaged in various occult investigations and experiments, and directed by a certain Gurdjieff, a Caucasian Greek. Because of my previous experience, it was only after the persistent efforts of one of my new acquaintances that I agreed to meet Gurdjieff and have a talk with him. My first meeting with him entirely changed my opinion of him and of what I might expect from him. I remember this meeting very well. I saw a man who astonished me because he seemed completely out of the place and its atmosphere. I was still full of impressions of the East, and this man with the face of an Indian Raja or an Arab sheikh, whom I at once seemed to see in a white burnous or a gilded turban, was sitting in that small cafe. He spoke Russian incorrectly with a strong Caucasian accent, and this accent, with which we are accustomed to associate anything apart from philosophical ideas, strengthened still further the strangeness and the unexpectedness of this impression. I was deeply interested in everything he said. I felt in it some new points of view, unlike any I had met with before. He invited me to go with him to a house where some of his pupils were gathering. On the way, He told me how the war had interfered with many of his plans. Many of his pupils had gone with the first mobilization. Once or twice he mentioned his journeys in the East and the existence of the ancient knowledge. I could not make out exactly where he had been. I mentioned to him my intention of going to the East again. Even if you found schools, you would find only philosophical schools, he said. There are only philosophical schools in India. It was divided up in that way long ago. In India there was philosophy, in Egypt theory, and in present-day Persia, Mesopotamia, and Turkestan practice. But you do not understand clearly what I mean by philosophy, theory, and practice. These words must be understood in a different way, not as they are usually understood. But how did you study? I asked him. I was not alone. There were all kinds of specialists among us. Everyone studied on the lines of his particular subject. Afterwards, when we got together, we put together everything we had found. And where are your companions now? Some have died, some are working, some have gone into seclusion. This word from the monastic language, heard so unexpectedly, gave me a strange and uncomfortable feeling. One was struck by a great inner simplicity and naturalness in him, which made one completely forget that he was, for us, the representative of the world of the miraculous and the unknown. Though he did not say it loudly, he gave me to understand that he would accept me as one of his pupils if I expressed the wish.